Okay, so today we have Elise Elam, who was a 2011 UC Law grad. She's a double Bearcat, actually. So 2008 from undergrad and 2011 from UC Law. And Elise and I have not met. We've talked on the phone, but I had a very, very engaging conversation yesterday. And when I hung up, I thought two things. Wow, students need to hear from Elise. And also, wow, we're not going to have any problem filling a half hour because there was a lot to talk about. Remarkable approach to your career path with an impressive long-term perspective. Are a couple of things I took away. So I'm going to let you tell your story, and then we'll have some questions from the students, and we have a prospective student on today as well, which is great. And thank you very much for being here. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you to the students who are here and who will be watching, at a later time. Just kind of in a nutshell, I'll tell you the sort of highlights version. So I went to UC Law, graduated in 2011. I was a single mom at the time, so that was an added challenge as well. But I had a lot of support from the law school community, faculty, my fellow students. And then I started working at Baker Hostetler after I took the Ohio bar exam. I did document review for about a year and a half before I started working for a Hamilton County judge. Her name is Judge Lubers. And if you ever get a chance to meet her or speak with her or visit her courtroom, please do. She's amazing, and she's very engaging and loves to talk to students, young lawyers, you name it. I worked for her for 3 years, and then I left to work at Frost Brown Todd, which some of you may know is another large firm in Cincinnati. And I did workers' comp defense. And I was there for a couple of years until December of 2018. I was laid off for basically we just didn't have enough work to give me. It just happened. There was a slowdown in workers' comp across the entire state of Ohio. So it wasn't just our firm or just me. It was pretty much across the board. So at that point in time, I had to sort of reevaluate my career and, where did I go from there? What am I going to do now? How can I leverage what I've done previously into something that, is going to be fulfilling and, hopefully a long-lasting career. So after much reflection and research, I decided that I was extremely interested in cybersecurity and privacy. Obviously that is a growing field right now. It's growing rapidly. So in essentially 2019, I studied for and took examinations to get 3 separate privacy certifications. I also obtained my master's in IT, all with the aim of becoming a cybersecurity attorney. And then this past March, on March 16th, actually right at the beginning of sort of the whole work from home, shelter in place thing, I started working again at Baker Hostetler, but this time as a data breach attorney. So I'm in the incident response group. And, I've been there, like I said, since March, middle of March. And, I'm super excited about my current role and, the growth opportunity there at the firm. And I'm really happy to be here to talk to you guys today.
Elise, let's talk a little bit about networking. I think it was something that was really eye-opening to me in terms of how seriously you take networking and how much it's meant to your career. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you've approached that from when you were a law student all the way through? You have your job right now because of networking.
Yes. So, in law school, Mina especially, and I'm sure you do too, really try to impart upon the students how important networking is. And, the law school did a great job of providing opportunities for networking as well as tools to learn how to network or, just different things you can do depending on your goals from networking, things like that. And that was really beneficial to me. I'm still in contact with people that I met as a law student, attorneys who've been practicing, for 30 years now. And I still talk to them, and they've been great mentors throughout, my career. But networking is one of those interesting things that, doesn't usually provide instant gratification. You rarely see the fruits of your labor immediately. And I would say even a fast turnaround is a couple months, and it's not immediate at all. So you have to keep in mind that it really is, a long-term, strategy or long-term business practice. And you're not going to get something out of it right away, except for, sort of the enjoyment of, meeting somebody new, having a conversation with somebody new, that fortunately I find that enjoyable. So I do get something out of it sort of immediately in that sense. But case in point, I worked at Baker right out of law school, so fall of 2011. And my boss at the time is named Ted Martin, and I've kept in contact with him over the years. We've had lunch, coffee, you name it. He's a really great mentor anyway, and a great resource. But he, really took an interest in what I was doing, and he knew that Baker was growing their, data privacy group and their incident response group, and really pushed for Baker to hire me. It was not his decision because he's not in that group, but he really advocated for me in the firm and to the people who made the decision. And I think very much because of that, I have the job that I have now, and that's nearly 9 years later. So, and there are so many other stories sort of along the way as well, of similar experiences. My job at Frost, I got through networking as well. And it's just one of those things you have to keep in mind that you will see benefits from your networking efforts. It just can take a really long time. And so don't get discouraged. It really is a long-term sort of, strategy, and you have to keep that in mind.
We talked a little bit yesterday about some of the different types of networking you've done. Some of it's very active networking, some of it's passive networking. Can you talk a little bit about that, especially like, the moms group and that sort of stuff? We don't think of as networking, but if it bears fruit professionally, then we'll put it in that category.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good way to put it, active versus passive. And then there are sort of different categories within those. There's, the active networking, which is something like going to happy hours, going to, a CLE and hanging around afterwards during, a coffee or something like that. And, speaking with people, it could be one-on-one coffee or lunch, things like that. Those are active networking. Well, I joined a group on Facebook actually called Mothers Esquire. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's moms who are lawyers. It is now a nationwide group. We actually have some attorneys who are overseas for various reasons. Maybe their spouses in the military, for example. Lots of different people in the group. And it has been an amazing networking tool for me. It's one of those things where, like Jim mentioned, it's passive because I'm a member of the group. I get on Facebook anyway. I see, posts in my feed. If it interests me, I'll click on it, read the article, read the post, respond to the post, whatever the case is. If it doesn't apply to me, I scroll past. And it's very passive because I've learned many things just because I've seen it posted in the group. But when I got laid off back in December 2018, that very day I happened to go on Facebook and saw that somebody else had posted that they needed some contract-based work for legal research and writing. So I emailed her right away and basically had no interruption whatsoever in my work. and it was kind of a fluke because I just happened to see the post, but that's sort of the power of networking right there. And just keeping in mind that it really took very little effort. I mean, I literally just pulled up Facebook and was scrolling and happened to see the post. So, you can do so many things that really require very little effort that can still bear fruit, quickly or, down the road. And so I think it's important to consider multiple avenues of networking. LinkedIn can be a really great way as well to interact with other people. And there are just so many opportunities, to be able to network.
And in your networking, you've become you've gone from being a student or a recently laid off attorney to someone people now seek out. People reach out to you and say, Elise, how do I do what you've done?
Yeah, it's a very weird experience. I think that, every attorney has that turning point at some point in their careers where it's going to happen, where people start coming to you for the advice instead of you always being the one to ask. But the more recent experience that I had was somebody that I met in law school through a mentorship program. At that point, he had already been practicing for probably 25 years. And, we've kept in touch over the years, and he had followed me on LinkedIn. He saw what I had been up to, saw that I had gotten privacy certifications and got a master's and all this stuff. And he called me and asked my advice on things like the privacy certifications, the master's programs, because he was interested in pivoting his career into, privacy related career. And so he was asking me for advice. And again, it was a little unsettling, but at the same time, I actually did have advice to give him. And, I'm very happy to be able to give that to him.
That's great. Let me back up a little bit to February of 2018. I want to talk a little bit about resilience because it takes something special. It doesn't just happen that you're laid off and now you are where you are 18 months later. Just kind of, can you walk us through that? From the sit down meeting to we can't keep you anymore to how you turned it all around?
Sure. I mean, it was certainly scary, and I wouldn't say it was entirely out of the blue because, again, I knew how much I was working and how many hours I was working, and it wasn't enough. However, no one gave me any hint whatsoever that they were going to, get rid of me. And so that really did come as a complete shock. And I remember, getting an email saying, so-and-so wants to have a meeting with you and me at 2 p.m. And I knew exactly what it was because that person wouldn't be meeting with me for any other reason. So I sat there for, I don't remember, 3 hours or something, basically, imagining how it was going to go, knowing I was going to probably, lose my job. And, so that was pretty stressful. But, parting was amicable. That was, so that made it easier, but it forced me to evaluate my goals, to really think hard about, okay, this has happened to me. This is basically one of the few opportunities I'm going to have in order to truly, pivot my career or turn it into what I want it to be. And I had to spend some time really thinking about that. And I had to be reflective and do a little bit of soul searching and think about, what parts of the law do I really enjoy? What don't I enjoy so much? What are my skill sets? But probably more importantly, what what am I interested in? What's going to, be, the most, I guess, fulfilling to me intellectually and that kind of thing. So I had to think about that, really hard and make a plan. So I went from thinking, sort of introspectively to looking externally, and of course this all sort of overlapped, but looking externally at opportunities. I did research on the job market. And one of the reasons I chose the path that I did is because there were a lot of non-traditional attorney roles, where you don't necessarily have to have a law degree or be a licensed attorney to, do that type of role. And, so that just sort of, even though my first choice would be what I'm doing now, which is, an incident response attorney, there were still opportunities for me if that didn't pan out. I could do other types of privacy work, in-house, but not as a lawyer. There are many jobs that are JD preferred, meaning it's not required, but they really like it if you have that background. And I've seen that a lot in the privacy space. And so those are some of the reasons why I chose the path that I did. It took a lot of research, a lot of studying, even apart from the extra, the schoolwork that I did, studying for the examinations, things like that. Yeah.
So we have an incoming 1L, a rising 2L, and a rising 3L on the call today, and plenty more are going to watch this. But we're in a very uncertain time. The jobs market we're not sure where it's going to go. Summer employment, programs have been cut from traditional 12-week to a 4-week program or a 5-week program, and we have students who simply aren't working. So there's a lot of adversity and there's a lot of concern. And what's your advice in terms of pulling out from deep down whatever it is you need to get through this? What's your because you've done it. What's your advice for students at any level in terms of getting through this?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, obviously you're going to have moments, you're going to have times where you feel discouraged, you feel, why did I go down this path? Is this really for me? And, I believe that, my, JD has really benefited me, even though, yes, I got laid off and I've had hard times, but, I was able to almost immediately start working. And I did contract-based work, doing legal research and writing because I have a JD, making better money than you can, in a lot of other fields. And I could do it from home. And that was even before, all the shelter in place work from home started. It was over a year ago when I was doing that. And I think, use the time, if you don't get a job right away, first of all, that's okay. Second of all, that's happened to many other people and has nothing to do necessarily with, COVID-19. And just think about it in terms of your long-term plan, and try not to think myopically. Don't think about just, next month or even next year. Think about your entire career, and, getting a job, 6 months after passing the bar exam, as opposed to right away, is not going to make a big difference in the scope of your entire career. Having an interruption in your career is not going to matter in the grand scheme of things. It might feel really hard while you're going through it. It might feel very scary, and that's totally normal, and that's okay to feel that way. But just try to think about it, long-term, large scale, big picture, that, one or even two or a few interruptions not going to break your career, and you're going to pull out just fine. You're going to be, just fine. It might take a little while, and you just have to be patient. And I know that's really hard to do. It can be very discouraging. I can't tell you how many jobs I applied for, during this past, year and a half, and rejection after rejection after rejection. And it's hard. It gets really tiring and gets really discouraging, but you just have to stay with it. I know it's easy for me to say, I'm on the other side of it mostly, but, the other thing is, I started my job March 16th. And so, law firms are hiring, maybe not to the extent that they were. Maybe they're being more cautious. But, we're still busy. We're working. People need lawyers now, at least, more than ever. And so it might take more time, but, it's not a forever thing. You're going to find your feet and find where you belong sooner or later. And it's going to be great.
Great. That's almost like our tagline for the Work Goes On series. That's great.
Yep. Yep.
What Summer, Chelsea, Alicia, what questions do you have while we have Elise here? Alicia Hamilton, you're our SBA networking chair.
I knew you were going to call me out. I actually, Elise, I don't know if you remember me, but we actually met for breakfast at Wild Eggs when you worked at Frost. I just
do,
my email to make sure. I was like, this name looks familiar.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of questions. I might send you something over email to follow up on that conversation, because I came into this conversation a little bit late, so I kind of missed the beginning of your talk, unfortunately. Sure.
Yeah, please feel free to email me. I'd be happy to talk with you, okay, or anyone else. Mm-hmm.
Elise, are you working all at home now, or when do you start to go back to the office, or what's that look like?
So I have pretty much been, with the exception of my onboarding, which was about a week or so, just getting my electronics, my laptop and stuff set up. I've pretty much been work from home since end of March, and I haven't gone into the office at all. I am going to start going back into the office next week. Our firm is doing sort of a cycle where group one is a third of our office goes in during week one. Group two goes in during week two, which is this week. Group three, which I am in, is next week. And then we do the cycle for another 3 weeks. And then we're going to reevaluate to see if we reopen the office completely or, continue with the cycle that we've been doing. And, we're still, doing things like social distancing and wearing masks and things like that. I don't know if you can see, Summer asked a question. Yeah. How have you restructured networking during COVID? That's a really great question, because obviously we can't really be meeting, for coffee, and certainly not happy hours or, large CLEs, things like that. I personally am doing emails, checking in, some phone calls, depending on the relationship that you have with the person. If you have a subject that you are interested in, you want to learn more about, you can reach out to that type of attorney and say, do you have 15 minutes to speak with me, on the phone about this topic, and you can have a phone call that way. That type of networking is just as effective, honestly, as face-to-face. And, you can really get a lot out of those types of sort of 15, 20-minute conversations. Reaching out on LinkedIn a little bit more to others. I try really hard to make sure I respond to people who reach out to me. I had many questions about, for example, the privacy certifications that I got this past year. People reached out to me and asked my advice, or how much did I study, things like that. So I try really hard to sort of pay it forward and respond. My firm specifically is doing a little bit. We have some groups that try to, quote, meet, virtually, maybe once a month or something like that. My team is a pretty big dispersed team. And I can even tell you how many lawyers are in our team. It's a pretty big group, spread across the entire country. And so we do have our video calls. We check in about once a week so we can see each other's faces and things like that, which, networking inside your firm is important also, especially when you aren't all working in the same office. Leverage, technology to your advantage, LinkedIn, social media, email, that kind of thing.
Elise, would you agree that in some ways, all of this remote work, it's actually a very good time to do networking in the sense that you can actually kind of stand out now. If you send a message to an attorney and say, hey, I'm just thinking about you, hope things are going well. I'm, as you may recall, I'm a rising 3L. We're still trying to figure out what the fall semester is going to look like. That's a kind of an easy, low-hanging fruit type of networking, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is. And it takes very little effort to initiate it. Very little, I should say, not so much effort, but little time to initiate it. And of course, you want to be thoughtful with your emails and things like that. But, it really doesn't take a whole lot of time to reach out to, even a handful of people that you're interested in talking with. And, it can be, you can stand out, certainly. And I think people also are kind of, even though we're working and we're busy, we kind of need this human interaction that is not just client calls or, specifically work related. I think we all need that. And it's hard that, we've been working from home, most of us, this whole time. And some semblance of normality can be helpful, which may just be responding to an email or hopping on a phone call can feel closer to normal.
Yeah,
and I think
great.
people are receptive to that.
I think that sense of normalcy is what I was trying to get at. Is sort of, I've gotten some emails and I've sent some text to some attorneys just to say, hey, hope you're doing well. Want to send a note of encouragement. Hang in there. And I think people are hungry for that. It's a good time for students to kind of reach out and remind attorneys that they're still there.
I agree.
That's great. So, any questions from students? Okay.
Yeah, I'll can you guys hear me?
Thanks. Yes.
Yeah. So I guess this is one of those questions that the answer may not be any different, or it may be a bit of a loaded question in a way, but as a rising 2L, typically we would be looking at starting to interview, in August for our 2L summers, and hopefully for what's going to become our eventual, the company that, or the firm that makes an offer for us eventually to come on full time. And we're starting to see some things where some firms are saying they may not look to hire until later, it may be January before they really start evaluating like what next summer looks like and evaluating the, the effects that the COVID is going to have long term on their hiring. So with that in mind, and we, this may be something that Jim even has a little bit more of an idea about, or something more to say about. Some of the students have been wondering if we're even going to have, if OCI is going to look different and that sort of thing. So I guess my question, it just kind of like opens the discussion and isn't really a very pointed question, but just sort of, what are your recommendations about what specifically like Rising 2L should be doing, knowing that we may not have the typical OCI experience and may not, there may be, not as many of us coming away from the August, September timeframe with our summer jobs, wrapped up and that sort of thing. What, in some ways that feels like an opportunity and a blessing, because it gives us more time to really explore and to figure out what it is that we want to do or what firms we may want to end up at. But in some other ways, it also feels like there's a little bit more pressure there because you get rolling in the semester. It's harder to network in the semester when you're in classes and you have all these other things going on. So I guess my discussion that I'd like to open would be, what would you be doing in this time to try to keep exploring and figure out what, how you want to go about, where you land for your 2L summer and beyond?
Yeah, that's a great question and great points. I think, continuing to reach out to, maybe even just a handful of attorneys at firms or organizations that you're really interested in, working for them or in organizations that are similar, you can, cultivate those relationships, and you can do so via email. If you're top of mind, that can't hurt. That can only help you if you stay relevant in their minds. Like, I talked to Chelsea. I remember she said that she was interested in this type of work. And it could be that they're not hiring, but they know someone who is. And so it can benefit you that way. I'll also tell you that, I went through OCI and I had interviews, but I didn't get a job through OCI. I didn't have my summer job lined up until I think it was maybe April, before my summer between 2L and 3L years. So, and it was a great job and a great experience. So, kind of going back to what I said before, try not to get too discouraged if you don't have something lined up, because that's happened to many people many times, and you come out of it okay. I think another thing to do as well is to maybe expand your search a little bit as far as the different types of organizations or the different types of law that you might say, I really want to do corporate law. I don't want to be a litigator. I want to be a transactional corporate lawyer. And that's pretty focused. And that might be what you end up doing, but there's no harm in doing something else during your 2L summer. And actually that can only really help you. I think you can be a more well-rounded lawyer going forward. So if you end up working at a litigation firm, for example, there's nothing wrong with that. You might be disappointed in the moment that you didn't get your number one pick or something like that, but any legal experience is going to help you. I was a fellow with the Ohio Innocence Project, and I knew I didn't want to do criminal law, but it really opened my eyes to a lot of issues. And I think that, I understand things better about, criminal law specifically, but even other areas of the law than I would have otherwise because of that experience. So, you can have a variety of really great experiences. And I've also heard from people who, kind of came out of law school back in, around 2008 when, the economy was not doing great. A lot of law firms were sending offers, and it was kind of a bleak time to be graduating from law school. And what a lot of people ended up doing was sort of kind of cobbling together a summer job from a handful of different firms or organizations. Maybe they volunteered, as a law clerk in a public defender's office for 2 weeks, and then they worked for 2 weeks at a small, litigation firm or something like that. You can get creative with all sorts of things. And, when you bring together all of these experiences, it'll all help you. And so even if it ends up being a non-traditional summer for you and many of your classmates, it's not going to be the end of the world. And also keep in mind that everybody is going through it with you across the entire country. So it's not like, when you go to apply to a job, attorneys who are hiring are going to wonder, well, why didn't you have a full 12-week or 10-week, summer clerkship or something like that? Everybody is going through it. So, try to keep that in mind as well and not get too discouraged.
That's great advice, Elise. I think that's very much. In fact, if you wake up one day and say, you know what, I'm tired of this big firm data privacy stuff. What I really want to do is work for CPD. Please call us, and let's see if we can find a space for you. I think we've been telling students the same thing. We've had a very non-traditional summer. I expect we're going to have a very non-traditional fall. OCI is going to look very different. We're not sure what it's going to look like, but we know it's going to be different. Big firm post-grad hiring is going to look different. Spring is probably going to look different. So I think these are agile and curious, like you said, expand your thinking in terms of what your areas of interest are. I can tell you from the employer side, in the first 6 hours of the day today, I've talked to a public interest attorney, federal judge, and you. And there's a consistent theme in that we're all still figuring out how this is going to work. But the folks who are going to be the most successful at it are the ones who are going to be able to adapt and change how they do things and be ready to, try to do things in a way they haven't done before. Which is, in a way, a consistent theme in your career. I mean, it's really remarkable. You've reinvented yourself. You've taken different directions. You've been brave. You've networked. You've understood the big picture, the long term, and I think that's really, really valuable experience. So Thank you very much for your generous donation of your time today. We very, very much appreciate it. You're a very good friend of the college. And if we ever get open again, we'd like you to come into the college and talk live to the students if and when that.
I'd be happy to. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for being here today. Elise, thanks very much. Take care.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, everyone.